The mist rolled low over Street Aldwyn's Green, soft, still, and full of Sunday quiet, the kind of morning that smelled of bread from the bakery and rain that hadn't fallen yet. Miss Marple adjusted her gloves. The church bell had rung twice already, both times wrong, once at 7, once again at 8. Odd, she thought. The bell tower had been silent for nearly 10 years. Lady Dolly Bantry joined her by the gate, breath puffing in the chill. "New bell ringer, Jane. Young fellow, Peter Lyle. Keen as mustard, they say." "Enthusiasm," Miss Marple replied, "is a virtue that often outruns caution." They crossed the gravel path toward the restored church. The tower loomed freshly scrubbed, its stone pale against the morning sky. Villagers bustled around the porch, choir members with scarves, the verger with his keys, Reverend Copley flapping about like a nervous crow. "Such excitement, my dear," said Dolly, as if the Queen herself were coming to listen. Inside, warmth gathered. Kettles hissed. Sheet music fluttered. The smell of polish and tea candles filled the nave. Miss Marple smiled at the sight, order returning, at least for a little while. Then came the scream, high, sharp, cutting through the hymn's first note, like glass through silk. Everyone froze. Then running feet, shouting from the stairwell. Miss Marple and Dolly followed the sound, skirts brushing the narrow steps. Halfway up the tower, on the small landing below the belfry, Peter Lyle lay motionless. His hand clutched the thick bell rope, his face pale as parchment. The rope itself was wet, darkened along the braid, and smelled faintly of vinegar. Reverend Copley crossed himself. Inspector Slack, already arriving from across the square, muttered, "Heart failure. Happens. Too much excitement for a lad." But Miss Marple's eyes were not on the body. They were on the rope. She bent closer. Tiny flecks of green clung to the fibers. Copper oxidation. She rubbed a bit between her fingers. It left a metallic scent. Not natural, weathering something fresh. Recent. "Inspector," she said quietly, "might we examine the bell itself?" Slack frowned. "Madam, this is a simple tragedy, not one of your puzzles." "Tragedies," Miss Marple said gently, "often prefer to wear simple clothes." They climbed the remaining steps. The bell gleamed above, newly polished, heavy and proud, but near its rim, a small patch of discoloration. Green, crusted, like corrosion from something chemical. She touched the edge with a gloved finger. It tingled faintly as if charged. "Electric light wiring runs through the tower," Slack grumbled. "Modern nonsense. Bound to cause mishaps." Miss Marple said nothing. Her eyes traced the wire that looped behind the bell and down the wall. New wire. Copper. Clean. Dolly whispered, "Jane, you think someone?" Marple only shook her head. "Not yet, but something is wrong. Very wrong." The air inside the tower thickened. Quiet. Still. Only the soft creak of the bell rope swaying slightly in the breeze. Miss Marple turned toward the stairs. "Inspector," she said calmly, "I suggest no one touch anything until the weather clears. Moisture and metal make dangerous company." Slack grunted. "Superstition," he muttered. Marple smiled faintly. "Experience," she corrected. She descended slowly, each step echoing down the spiral stone. Outside, the mist had lifted just enough for the sun to touch the tower's tip. The village stood silent. Even the birds waited. And then, deep above them, the great bell moved. Once, twice. The sound rolled through the morning air, but no one had pulled the rope. The bell stopped, not slowly, sharply. Like a held breath, a hush spread through the square. Only the sea wind moved, brushing the churchyard grass. Inspector Slack barked orders. "Clear the path." No one. Inside. The villagers obeyed, though they didn't go far. Curiosity always wins over fear. Miss Marple stood near the porch, hands folded neatly over her handbag. Her eyes didn't leave the tower. Something about its silence felt heavier than the sound before. Lady Bantry sighed beside her. "Jane, I can still hear the echo." "Poor boy," the way it ended. Marple's tone was soft. "Echoes, Dolly, often tell more than shouts. One must listen to them properly." Inside, The church smelled of metal polish and damp cloth. The bell rope hung still, gleaming faintly in the dim light. 2 constables moved carefully across the stone floor, marking footprints in the dust. Miss Marple followed at a distance, unnoticed. Her fingers brushed the pew rail. Fine grains of powder clung there, grey, not dust. She rubbed them lightly between her fingertips. Not ash, not chalk, something metallic again. She looked toward the tower door. The latch was wet. Not from rain, the sky outside was clear. Something had dripped down its iron curve. Acid, she thought. Vinegar leaves a scent. This sharper. Reverend Copley appeared from the vestry, his hands trembling around a mug of tea. He looked 10 years older than yesterday. "Miss Marple," he said quietly, "forgive me. I don't understand it. We blessed the bell last week. Holy water, prayers." The boy was careful. Marple smiled kindly. "Faith and care both have limits, Reverend. Neither stops electricity." He blinked. "Electricity?" But before she could answer, Inspector Slack returned from the tower stairs, red-faced. Nothing there. No loose wires, no tampering, no footprints worth noting. He climbed too high, overexerted himself. That's all. Miss Marple tilted her head. "Then why is the tower door closed from inside?" Slack frowned. "It's locked?" "Not locked," she said. "Closed. Yet your men are all here." He strode back, tugged the handle. The latch gave a long metallic creak. It hadn't moved in hours. The sound echoed upward deep into the bell chamber. They all looked up. Silence again. Complete. Marple turned slightly, scanning the nave. The sunlight through the windows caught on something near the altar. A folded cloth. She walked closer. It was a cleaning rag, stiff, discolored. A faint shimmer along one edge, copper green, and beside it, a small nail, burnt black. She called softly. "Inspector." He groaned. "Now what?" She handed him the cloth. He sniffed it, grimaced. "Smells like a workshop." "Precisely," she said, "though this church has none." He gave her a look halfway between suspicion and respect. "You think someone brought their work inside?" Marple smiled. "I think someone never left it outside." From above, a faint creak answered one the human ear might call coincidence. Slack looked up sharply. "Wind," he said. "No," whispered Marple. "Wind doesn't step." They waited. Another creak, a slow scrape of rope sliding against wood. Then a soft, clear sound. Her name. "Miss Marple," Dolly gasped. Slack's torch beam shot upward. Empty air. Nothing but the bell's dark hollow, still and silent. But the voice had been real. Rain arrived just after noon. A slow, whispering rain. The kind that turns rooftops into grey lace and keeps secrets from drifting away. Miss Marple sat in the vicarage kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Steam curled softly between her spectacles and the world. Across the table sat Reverend Copley and his wife, Margaret, kind eyes, trembling spoon. Lady Bantry busied herself with scones. Because when death visits, tea follows. "The whole village is shaken," Margaret said, voice low. "Peter was such a sweet boy, always whistling while he worked." Miss Marple nodded. "And always early, I hear." "Yes, always," Margaret replied. "He'd come before dawn to polish the ropes. Said the tower felt alive that time of day." The Reverend sighed. "Alive may not be the word I'd choose." He stirred his tea without drinking. "You must understand, Miss Marple, the restoration project nearly broke this parish. We had to raise funds from everyone, collections, donations, even loans." Miss Marple looked at the ledger lying near the sugar bowl. Old leather, new ink. She opened it carefully. Columns of names, numbers, notes. One line drew her attention. Miss Dawes, private contribution, cash, no sum. Just a short mark, like something erased and rewritten. She turned the page. One sheet missing, torn clean at the seam. "Curious?" she murmured. The Reverend glanced up. "What is?" "This gap," she said, "between who gave and who was remembered for it." Margaret frowned. "Oh, that. The donor insisted on privacy. Always a reason for secrecy, Miss Marple said softly. And seldom a holy one. She ran her finger down another column. Small note in red ink beside a later entry. Rewire lighting. Urgent. Her brows lifted. Rewire? She asked. The Reverend looked confused. Yes, the tower lights. The engineer, Mr. Trent, said it was necessary for safety. Marple stirred her tea once, slowly. Safety often becomes danger when profit walks beside it. Lady Bantry looked up. Jane, you think this Trent fellow had something to do with Peter's accident? I think, Marple said gently, that accidents rarely have ledgers. Thunder rumbled far off. Margaret rose to close the window. Her hand brushed a stack of hymn sheets on the sill. One slipped to the floor, landing face down. Ink blurred where a drop of tea fell. Beneath it, another mark appeared faint, almost hidden a smear of green. Miss Marple leaned closer. Copper again. Has anyone been cleaning near the ledger? She asked. No, Margaret said. We haven't touched that table since Peter came for his pay envelope. Marple's tone softened. He was paid here? Yes. The Reverend gave him his wages yesterday afternoon. Copley nodded. He seemed cheerful. Said he'd be back early today to test the bell's echo. Miss Marple looked down at the page. The ink shimmered oddly in the lamplight, wet, though untouched. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the margin. It hissed as it touched the air. The Reverend gasped. Good heavens, what's happening? Marple lifted the ledger slightly. A faint sizzle came from the spine. Vinegar and metal, she murmured. Left together overnight. A small reaction, perhaps. Lady Bantry stared. You mean someone put acid inside the book? Marple closed the cover slowly. Someone wanted a number to vanish, but not the truth that clings beneath it. The rain outside grew heavier. The church bell gave a dull, distant groan in reply. No wind, no hands. Miss Marple looked toward the sound, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not finished ringing yet, Dolly. Morning broke pale and damp. Mist still clung to the hedges as if it feared to leave. Miss Marple walked slowly toward the workshop behind the church. Her knitting bag swung lightly at her side, harmless camouflage. Inside, the smell of solder and oil filled the air. Wires coiled like snakes across a table. At the center stood Charles Trent, the church's restoration engineer, tall, tidy, and too polite. He smiled when he saw her. Ah, Miss Marple, I wondered when you'd come snooping. She smiled back. Observation, Mr. Trent. Snooping requires less tea and more haste. He laughed, though his eyes didn't. You've heard the nonsense, I suppose. Electrical this, chemical that. Poor Peter Lyle simply overdid it. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the open plans pinned on the wall. Neat diagrams of wiring, lamps, and the bell tower circuits. Her finger traced one line that branched where it shouldn't. It ran from the bell's framework to a box labeled Auxiliary Ground, Optional. Optional? She asked. Trent's smile tightened. A small addition. Safety measure, in case of storm build-up. How very thoughtful, she murmured. Her tone gentle, her eyes sharp. She noticed stains along the blueprint edge, faint yellow smudges, like acid that had dried. Trent followed her gaze. Ah, the rain came through the window last night. Ruined the paper. Rain seldom smells of vinegar, she said quietly. He froze for half a second, then shrugged. You have a sharp nose, Miss Marple. Age improves some senses, she replied. Dulls others. I rely on what remains. He turned away, rummaging among his tools. I've already told the inspector there was nothing faulty in my wiring. The system's sound. I'm sure it was, she said softly, until someone added something unsound to it. He looked over his shoulder. Meaning? Meaning safety wires rarely lead upward into a bell frame. His jaw tightened. You seem to know a lot about electrics. A little, she said, and a great deal about human nature. Both spark under pressure. He placed his soldering iron down too firmly. Peter was reckless. He probably spilled something, touched the rope with damp hands. That's all. Indeed. She stepped closer, examining a folded sheet near his elbow. A different kind of plan, handwritten, not drawn. Columns of names, dates, amounts, and at the bottom, his signature. "Mr. Trent," she said lightly, "you keep your accounts most carefully." "Business habit," he replied. Her eyes flicked over the final entry. "Street, Aldwyn Project, secondary materials, Cashy. No receipt attached." She smiled faintly. Such tidy handwriting. It must make hiding things rather troublesome. He met her eyes then, still smiling but colder. "You're implying theft. Dangerous talk, Miss Marple." "Oh, I never imply," she said. "I simply notice when things line up too neatly and hum when they shouldn't." A soft crackle interrupted them. Both turned toward the corner table. A blueprint curled inward, edges blackening. The paper sizzled, smoke rising from the lines she'd touched earlier. The acid stains were reacting again. Trent grabbed a rag, smothering the small burn. "Old copper residue," he said quickly. "Nothing serious." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Old copper seldom starts fires by itself." He forced a laugh. "Perhaps it's haunted. The villagers like that sort of tale." "Haunted?" she said mildly. "No, just conductive." Her knitting bag swung softly as she turned to leave. "Do take care, Mr. Trent," she added. "Electricity dislikes lies. They heat too easily." He didn't answer, just watched her go. The smell of burned paper followed her out into the grey morning, and behind her something hissed again, louder this time. The blueprint edges glowed faintly red, lines curling like veins under fire. Evening fell early over Street Aldwyns. Low clouds pressed down like a grey ceiling. The village lamps blinked on one by one in the drizzle. Miss Marple sat in the small sitting room of the Seahorse Inn. Firelight flickered gently against her knitting needles. The rhythm calmed the mind. Click, pause, click. Outside, the bell tower stood in silhouette against a dim horizon. A knock came at the door. Soft, hesitant. She looked up. "Mavis Lyle," said the innkeeper, holding the door open. The young woman stepped in quickly, shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes were red from crying. "Miss Marple." "I didn't know who else to speak to." Marple gestured toward the chair near the fire. "Then you chose correctly, my dear. Sit, warm, to yourself." Mavis Saturday. Her hands shook as she poured tea. "I can't stop thinking about Peter," she said. "He wasn't careless. He wasn't stupid." "No," Miss Marple said gently. "He was observant. And sometimes observation is dangerous." Mavis blinked. "How do you mean?" Marple's eyes softened. He saw something he wasn't meant to see. Something in that tower. The girl nodded slowly. "Yes, he mentioned it." She reached into her bag, pulling out a folded handkerchief. Inside it was a small metal tag, rough, discolored. "I found this in his coat pocket last night. It's part of something, I think. It smells burnt." Miss Marple held it up to the lamplight. A fragment of copper, edges eaten away, stamped faintly with 2 letters, C.T. "Charles Trent," she murmured. Mavis frowned. "The engineer?" "Yes, the man who wired the bell." Mavis's lips trembled. "Peter said the wiring was wrong. He showed me a small sketch, the bell connected to something it shouldn't be. I told him to give it to Reverend Copley. He said he would." "Did he?" "I don't know. The sketch was gone this morning." Miss Marple leaned back, thoughtful. Her fingers turned the copper tag slowly. "Tell me, Mavis, did your brother have enemies?" "No, but he argued with Mr. Trent last week. I heard them outside the church. Peter said, 'You can't hide that wire forever.'" Marple nodded slightly. "And what did Mr. Trent say?" Mavis's voice dropped. "He said, 'Then perhaps you shouldn't ring the bell again.'" For a moment, only the fire crackled. Miss Marple reached forward and poured another cup of tea. "You've done very well to tell me this. Fear likes silence, but silence helps it grow." Mavis's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't think it would matter. I thought it was just talk." "Talk," said Marple softly, "is how truth whispers before it dares to speak aloud." A gust of wind rattled the windows. Mavis startled, clutching her shawl. Marple rose and crossed to the table where her knitting lay. The firelight caught something on the floor, a small scrap of paper beneath Mavis's chair. She bent to pick it up, half burned at the edge. A few words visible in shaky pencil. Bell wired. Tell the Reverend. Use caution. The rest was gone. Scorched away. Marple's eyes met Mavis's. Did you bring this with you? Mavis shook her head. No. I've never seen it before. The older woman turned the fragment over. The back was smeared with black soot and faint green dust. Copper oxide. Fresh. Miss Marple straightened slowly. The rain outside had stopped. The bell tower stood dark against the lamplight beyond the window. Mavis, she said quietly, go home now. Stay inside. Lock your door. The girl hesitated. Why? Marple's gaze stayed on the tower. Because someone else may come looking for what Peter found. The bell chimed once low and hollow. The window trembled. No wind followed. The morning broke silent. Too silent. Even the sparrows seemed cautious. Miss Marple walked the narrow path back to Street Aldwyn's. Her shoes brushed the dew from the grass. A chill clung to the air that half-moment before sunlight finds its courage. The church door stood ajar. No police tape now. No watchers. Just the faint echo of a place trying to forget. Inside, the smell was different. Dust. Old wood. A hint of smoke from last night's vigil candles. She stepped quietly between the pews, her shoes whispering on the stone floor. Something caught her eye. A thin layer of powder covered the aisle, pale grey from the plaster work above. No one had swept, and through it ran footprints, 2 sets. One light and narrow, the kind a young man might make in worn shoes. Peter's, perhaps. The other deeper, heavier, broader sole, sharp heel. She crouched, measuring the stride with her knitting tape. Same direction, toward the tower door. But only one set came back, the larger one. She touched the edge of the print, still crisp. Made after the plaster fell, not before. That meant sometime last night. The air shifted above her. She looked up. The sunlight through the high window painted dust motes gold. It shimmered softly until something crossed in front of it, a moving shadow. Too fast, too solid to be a bird. She straightened. "Good morning," she said softly, to the empty nave. No reply. Only the slow creak of the tower stair. She moved toward it, careful not to disturb the prints. The smell of vinegar returned, faint but certain. A reminder. Metal. Moisture. Misdeed. At the base of the stairs she found another mark, a smear of black along the wall, like a glove brushed there in haste, or burned fabric. She leaned closer. Yes, burnt wool. And beneath it, a few green grains pressed into the plaster. Copper again, always copper. Inspector Slack will find this. Most inconvenient, she murmured. She climbed 3 steps, then stopped. Something glinted between the boards. A thin strip of wire. Bare. New. She followed it with her eyes up the stairwell. It disappeared into the shadows above. Her heart beat calmly, but steady. Logic first. Fear later. From the porch, a sound footsteps entering the church. Heavy, deliberate. The same weight as the deeper prints in the dust. She turned, standing half in shadow, half in light. Charles Trent. His sleeves rolled, face pale, eyes restless. "Miss Marple," he said lightly. "I might have guessed you'd be here." "I tend to arrive where sense goes missing," she replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm repairing a connection, that's all. Can't have the press calling it negligence." "Repairing?" She nodded toward the footprints. "Then you've been repairing?" "Often." He froze, a pause too long. Then he laughed. "Dust plays tricks, Miss Marple. You should leave this to the men who understand voltage." She stepped aside, letting him pass. "Voltage is predictable," she said. "Men are not." He climbed the stairs slowly, the boards groaning under each step. Halfway up he stopped, turned back. "You really should go home." Her eyes met his. "I will, once the bell stops lying." He stared a moment, then disappeared into the dark above. The smell of copper grew stronger. Outside, the clouds thickened, rolling low across the green. Thunder murmured somewhere far off. Miss Marple reached the door, meaning to call for Inspector Slack. But then the sound came. Soft at first, then deep. The bell. Ringing once. Slow. She froze. No one was pulling the rope. Evening settled before its time. Clouds pressed low, heavy as iron lids. Rain threatened, but held back as if waiting for permission. Inspector Slack met Miss Marple outside the church porch. He looked tired, cross, and slightly embarrassed. "You shouldn't be here after dark, madam." "I sleep better after I understand things," she said. "Besides, this isn't dark. It's only dim truth." He grumbled but unlocked the door. 15 minutes, then we're out." She smiled faintly. 15 is usually enough." They stepped inside. The air was cool, still damp from the morning mist. Lanterns flickered along the nave. The bell rope hung motionless, pale in the half-light. Slack glanced upward. "I've checked the wiring twice. Nothing wrong." "Then perhaps we're looking for something not meant to be found," she replied. They moved toward the rope room, a narrow stone space beneath the bell chamber. Coils of spare line lay piled like sleeping snakes. Dust drifted down from above with every creak. Slack lifted his lantern. "Nothing but ropes and pulleys." "Look lower," Miss Marple said, quietly. Along the floor ran a faint groove, a channel of darker color, freshly marked. She crouched, tracing it with her gloved finger. Something heavy was dragged here. Not rope. Metal. Slack squatted beside her. "Could be a toolbox." "Could be," she said. "Or a battery." He frowned. "Battery?" "For current," she said simply. "Electricity is rather fond of companions." He turned the lantern toward the wall. At first nothing, then a flicker, a glint of wire half buried in the mortar. Slack pulled at it gently. The copper strand quivered. It ran upward, disappearing into the beam above. "Well, I'll be—" His words cut short. The lantern flickered once, then twice. A faint blue spark leapt between the wire and the metal pulley. A hiss, then quiet again. "Loose connection," he muttered. Miss Marple shook her head. "Not loose, Inspector. Alive." They both stood still. The air carried a faint buzz like an insect trapped inside a glass jar. Slack moved to step forward, but she caught his sleeve. "Don't touch the rope," she warned. He stared at her, annoyed. "I'm not afraid of a little jolt." "It's not fear, Inspector," she said softly. "It's wisdom, and perhaps self-preservation." He stepped back grudgingly. "All right, suppose it is live. What then?" "Then someone turned the tower into a trap. One that kills when faith pulls the line." Thunder growled far off, rolling across the sea. Slack rubbed his jaw. "So you're saying Trent did this deliberately?" "I'm saying he understood how to." They listened. Drips from the ceiling. The whisper of rope fibers tightening in the damp. Then another spark. Small, bright, like a camera flash in the dark. Slack's lantern blinked out. Total blackness. "Don't move," she said quickly. He froze. Something above them hummed again. A slow rising tone, metallic and low. The rope began to tremble, just enough to be seen in the dark. A soft creak, a sigh, then the faintest smell of burnt linen. Slack swore under his breath. Marple's voice stayed calm. "Do you hear it?" "What?" "The current. It's humming like guilt." A final spark flared against the beam, sharp, white, blinding for an instant. Then darkness swallowed it whole. And from the bell above, one single note rang out low, deliberate, and cold. Morning crept in slow. Grey light. No birdsong. Just the low hum of sea wind against stone. Miss Marple sat on the church steps, knitting untouched beside her. She waited for Inspector Slack. He arrived late, hat tilted back, face grim. "Electricians are on their way," he said. "They'll test the wiring, prove nothing's wrong, and I'll still get blamed for witchcraft." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said mildly, "because it is easier to blame witches than wiring." He sighed. "Why do you look so calm, Miss Marple?" because panic never helps with logic. They went inside. The air smelled faintly metallic, that sharp tang of copper after rain. The rope hung still now, but its fibers looked darker. Slack raised his lantern. The light trembled across the beam above. Marple's eyes followed the glow upward to the bell itself. The brass was dulled now, a strange green haze clinging around its lower rim. Corrosion. Fresh. Oxidation, she murmured. Something's eating the metal. Slack grunted. It's the damp. Damp doesn't burn holes, Inspector. They climbed the narrow staircase, careful where each foot fell. At the top, the bell filled the chamber like a giant heart. Silent. Still. But alive in its own way. Miss Marple reached out a gloved hand, close enough to see the pattern of the corrosion, circular, around the edge as if something had been wrapped there. Wire, perhaps. Thin enough to hide, strong enough to kill. Slack leaned beside her. Looks like cleaning fluid, not wire. Then why does it smell of acid? She asked softly. A voice came from below. Good morning, Miss Marple. They turned. Elsa Pym, the young chemist who'd assisted in a prior case, stood at the bottom of the stair, raincoat, gloves, small metal kit in hand. The inspector thought you might like a second opinion, she said brightly. Slack muttered. I didn't say like. I said tolerate. Marple smiled faintly. Elsa's curiosity will be useful. The young woman climbed quickly, eyes wide at the sight of the bell. Beautiful, she said softly. But that's not normal tarnish. She reached into her kit, pulling a small glass vial. She scraped a sample gently. It fizzed the moment it touched liquid. Electrolytic reaction, she said. Someone ran current through the metal. Slack frowned. Meaning this bell was part of a circuit, Elsa said. Live current, possibly fatal. Marple nodded slowly. So our young Peter didn't die of heart failure after all. He completed a circuit. Slack swore quietly. Elsa bent closer to the bell. There's a melted spot here. Recent. She brushed it lightly with her finger. A tiny spark jumped between her glove and the bell. She gasped, jerking her hand back. The inspector lunged forward. Are you hurt? She shook her head. No, just startled. It's still holding charge. Miss Marple's eyes hardened slightly. Then someone reconnected it last night. Slack stared. Who would be fool enough to... Someone trying to destroy the evidence, she said. Elsa examined the underside of the bell. A scrap of wire dangled loose, end frayed and blackened. Copper again. Always copper, Marple whispered. Electric confession, hidden in plain sight. Slack pointed upward. What's that mark on the beam? Marple followed his gaze. A small handprint. Greasy. Half-wiped. Elsa peered closer. Still fresh. Slack nodded grimly. Then someone was here after we left. They stood together in silence. Outside, a low rumble of thunder rolled over the sea cliffs. The sound blended with the bell's faint echo, a whisper of vibration that trembled through the floor. Elsa looked uneasy. It's humming, she said. Marple's eyes stayed fixed on the bell. No, my dear. It's remembering. The next second, the wire beneath the bell twitched. A small blue spark jumped sharp, bright, alive. Rain came back without warning. Hard, sudden, relentless. It drummed against the church roof like impatient fingers. Miss Marple and Inspector Slack stood under the porch, watching the downpour blur the village green. Elsa Pym packed her testing kit, shoulders hunched under her coat. Everything's soaked again, she said. We'll lose half the surface samples. Marple glanced toward the churchyard. Her sharp eyes caught movement near the far gate. A figure, small and hurried, slipping between gravestones. Someone's out, she murmured. Slack followed her gaze. Foolish place to be in weather like this. Yes, she said softly, unless one is hiding something. They crossed the yard carefully, rain beating against their hats. Mud pulled at their shoes. The figure vanished behind the row of old tombs. When they reached the spot, only a wet hymnal lay half buried in the grass. Slack bent to pick it up. Just a book. Miss Marple took it from him. The cover was soaked, the spine cracked. She opened it gently. Between the pages, something thin glimmered, a folded sheet of copper foil. She slid it out. The rain washed across the metal, revealing faint lines, etched numbers and marks that looked like coordinates. Elsa leaned close. "Those aren't numbers," she whispered. "They're measurements. Volt readings." Marple turned the foil over. Tiny holes along one edge where it had once been nailed to something. "Perhaps the bell frame," she said quietly, "or the wiring junction behind it." Slack frowned. "You think this was part of the setup?" "I think," she said. It was part of the truth Peter tried to record. Elsa pointed to the corner of the foil. 3 letters faintly scratched there. CTL, Trent's initials. And Peter Lyle's. Together. Lightning flashed overhead, whitening the graves. The thunder followed instantly. The hymnal in Marple's hand trembled from the vibration. Raindrops ran down her sleeve, blotting the pages. Ink began to rise, darkening the soaked paper beneath. Words appeared faint, half-washed, but readable. He changed the line. "Bell live. Not for sound, for silence." Slack swore softly. "What does that even mean?" Marple's tone was calm. "It means the bell was never meant to ring. It was meant to stop someone from speaking again." A gust tore the hymnal from her hand. It tumbled down the path, pages fluttering like broken wings. Marple and Elsa chased after it, skirts whipping in the wind. It stopped at the church door, caught against the step. She bent to retrieve it. A smear of green streaked the wood beneath copper residue, fresh, streaking down from the hinge. "Someone's been inside again," she said. Slack reached for the handle. It resisted, swollen by rain, but not locked. He pushed. The door groaned open. The nave was dark, lanterns out. Only the faint drip of rain through a cracked window. On the central pew lay another hymnal, open. Its pages were clean except for one where a damp corner had curled upward. Underneath was a small brass key. Marple lifted it carefully. Stamped on the side tower control box. Elsa whispered, "He had a key made." Marple nodded slowly. "Someone always does when they plan to return." A sound echoed above, a faint metallic click, then a drag. Slack raised his torch. The beam caught dust falling from the ceiling. Footsteps. Marple's voice was barely more than breath. "He's here." The next instant, the bell gave one long groan, deep, vibrating through the floor. Not a ring, a warning. The bell's echo faded slowly, folding itself into silence. Then came the sound of water dripping from rafters onto stone. Miss Marple, Slack, and Elsa stood still, listening. The church felt different now. Tense, as if the air itself was waiting for something to confess. Slack whispered, "Stay here." He moved forward between the pews, torch beam cutting thin lines through the dark. Shadows leapt along the walls. Rain hissed against the stained glass, blurred and restless. Marple followed quietly. Her shoes made no sound. She stopped near the choir stalls where candles from last Sunday still sat in brass holders, half melted. Wax trails down the sides looked like frozen tears. Then a movement. A man crouched near the front pew, head bowed, hands covering his face. Reverend Copley. Slack exhaled. "For heaven's sake, Vicar, what are you doing creeping about?" The Reverend flinched. I heard the bell again. Thought perhaps I imagined it." His voice cracked. Elsa joined them, clutching the hymnal against her chest. "You shouldn't be here alone, Reverend." He sank into the nearest pew, hands trembling. "I couldn't sleep. I came to pray." Slack eyed him skeptically. "Or to make sure something stays hidden." Miss Marple placed a hand on the man's arm. "Inspector, let the poor soul breathe. Guilt and grief often sound the same at first." The Reverend looked up sharply. "You think I'm guilty?" Marple's eyes stayed gentle. "I think you're troubled, and that you know more than you've said." He pressed a handkerchief to his forehead. "Mr. Trent came to me last month. Said the tower needed rewiring before the new lighting could be blessed. He asked me to authorize extra funds." "Did you?" "Yes," he whispered. "I signed the papers." He said it was only a technical formality. Slack's jaw tightened. "And you never checked?" Copley shook his head. I'm a man of faith, Inspector. I trusted him. Miss Marple nodded slightly. Faith is a fine thing, but not always a safe one. Elsa knelt near the pulpit, studying a dark patch on the floor. Someone's been here since morning, she said. Fresh footprints. Mud from outside. Slack moved to the side door. Trent, he muttered. It has to be. The Reverend shuddered. Peter confronted him, didn't he? That's why he died. Marple looked down. Peter found evidence, the wiring, the copper sheets, the false accounts. But he trusted the wrong person with the truth. Copley buried his face in his hands. I let it happen. Marple shook her head softly. No, Reverend. You let honesty meet convenience. That's an old sin, but not an evil one. A faint thud echoed from above. Slack spun around. Upstairs. Elsa's eyes widened. I thought everyone was out. They were, said Marple, until someone came back for the key. Slack grabbed his torch. You stay here. No, Marple said firmly. We go together. They moved toward the tower door, each step slow, measured. The smell of ozone filled the air, that sharp metallic scent before lightning. A glimmer of blue flashed across the ceiling just once. Elsa gasped. Static discharge, she whispered. No, said Marple. A warning. The next moment, the rope swayed gently on its own. No hands, no wind. Slack raised his torch. A shadow moved on the landing above, tall, deliberate. Boots on stone. And then a voice, low, calm, familiar. Looking for confession, Miss Marple? The voice echoed from above. Calm, confident. Charles Trent, Inspector. Slack's torch caught him halfway up the tower stair. Coat damp, boots muddy, eyes shining like a man cornered but unbroken. He raised his hands slowly. No need for dramatics, Inspector. I came to finish repairs. Miss Marple's tone was quiet. At this hour? Electric faults don't wait for morning, he replied. Slack barked. Save the charm, Trent. We've found your wiring. We've seen what you built. Trent's smile didn't move his eyes. Then you should be grateful. The bell's safer than it's been in a century. Safer, Miss Marple repeated softly. Strange word for a grave. He froze. She climbed one step closer, never raising her voice. Peter Lyle trusted you. He noticed the changes. He confronted you here. And this, she nodded toward the bell above, was his punishment. Trent laughed once, short and bitter. You've got imagination, madam. I fixed wires. I don't murder choir boys. Perhaps not deliberately, she said. But you built a system meant to silence curiosity. That's always fatal in the end. Slack stepped forward. Let's test your handiwork, shall we? Trent frowned. What? The rope, man. You say it's safe, prove it. For a moment, no one spoke. Rain whispered through the cracks in the roof. The bell loomed above, dark against the lantern light. Slack gripped the rope. Marple's hand shot out. Wait. Her voice was calm but sharp. Not that one. Use the secondary line. Trent's jaw tightened. There is no secondary line. Oh, but there is, she said. The test rope, to the side, for maintenance. Slack tugged that smaller rope. The bell stayed silent. Nothing sparked. See? Trent said quickly. Perfectly harmless. Marple's eyes stayed on him. Then why, Mr. Trent? Does the insulation look new only on the lower half? He didn't answer. Elsa moved forward, examining the main rope. Her gloved fingers brushed the fibers. The faint scent of acid rose again. Because, she said softly, the upper half carries current. Slack turned. Show me. Elsa pointed to a copper strand running through the core, almost invisible in the dim light. It's live, she said. The current runs from the beam to the rope. Trent's mask slipped. Fine, he said quietly. It was meant to scare him, just frighten the lad. He wasn't supposed to die. Fear, Miss Marple said, is never safe once it leaves your control. Slack seized Trent's arm. You're coming with me. Trent jerked free. Wait, you'll never prove intent. There's nothing left. He stopped, His eyes darted upward. The wire he'd hidden was still attached, still live. Slack noticed it too. "Stand clear." Marple stepped back, pulling Elsa with her. Trent lunged toward the bell, maybe to tear the wire free. The rope trembled. A sharp crack split the air. Blue light flared once, bright as lightning. Slack shielded his face. When the flash faded, Trent was on his knees, stunned, clothes smoking faintly. Alive, but finished. The bell gave one slow sway above them. A single chime rolled through the air, deep, hollow, final. Miss Marple looked up. "The truth always rings once, Inspector," she said softly. "Then it waits to be heard." Slack exhaled. "We'll take him in." Marple nodded. "Yes, but someone still paid him to build it." He frowned. "What are you saying?" "The ledger," she whispered. The handwriting wasn't his. A gust of wind tore through the open window. Pages fluttered from the pew below the missing ledger sheet, carried by the draft. Slack bent to grab it. Ink blurred, but one name remained clear. Miss Dawes. The name on the page glistened in wet ink. Miss Dawes. Elegant handwriting. Flourished tail on the D. Definite. Deliberate. Inspector Slack turned the doddy sheet in his hands. "This is from the church ledger, isn't it?" Miss Marple nodded slowly. The missing page, torn from the binding, the one between donation and deception. Rain pressed harder against the tower windows. Elsa stooped to pick up another corner of paper caught on the step. Same handwriting, same ink. It matches every entry Trent filed. Marple's voice was low. Then Trent wasn't forging, he was working for someone. Slack scowled. "The sponsor, Miss Dawes. Wealthy widow lives outside the parish. Donated half the restoration funds." "Yes," said Marple, and asked to remain anonymous. A habit of people who prefer their good deeds untaxed. Slack tucked the paper into his coat. "We'll visit her." Marple's eyes stayed on the bell above. "Not yet. Look closer at the ink." He frowned. "It's smudged. What of it?" "It's fresh," she said softly. "Someone handled this recently, perhaps last night." Elsa examined the sheet again. "There's residue here, faint blue crystals, electrolyte powder, the kind used to clean circuit contacts." Marple smiled faintly. "How practical. Our sponsor isn't afraid of science." Slack rubbed his forehead. "Now we've got an engineer who built a weapon and a benefactor who funded it. Marvelous." "Not a weapon," Marple corrected. "A deterrent. Something meant to frighten or silence a voice that asked the wrong question." They left the tower. The nave felt cooler now, the storm's echo humming through the glass. Elsa laid the papers on a pew to dry. The ink blurred further, but the bottom line stayed visible, a sum in bold digits. £200, she said. "Paid 2 days before Peter's death." Slack's brow furrowed. "That's no donation. That's hush money." Marple's eyes softened. Or guilt in disguise. From outside, footsteps. Not hurried, steady, deliberate. The heavy door creaked open. A figure stepped in, shaking off an umbrella. Miss Dawes. Tall, composed. Silver hair tucked beneath a hat. She smiled faintly. "I thought I might be expected." The constable at the gate looked uncertain whether to salute or stop me. Slack straightened. "You've come at an interesting time, madam." "I usually do," she replied. Her eyes moved to the papers drying on the pew. "How clever of you to find those. I'd hoped the storm would take care of them." Marple's voice stayed gentle. "You knew then." Miss Dawes sighed. "I knew Peter suspected Trent. I told him not to interfere. The bell system was my commission. A simple project turned complicated." "Complicated?" Marple repeated. "By theft or by conscience?" The woman's gaze lowered. "Both. Trent overcharged. I agreed to look the other way until Peter found the second account book. He meant to show the Reverend. I told him to wait." Slack's tone hardened. "And when he didn't?" Miss Dawes closed her eyes. "I didn't stop him. I only told Trent he was growing suspicious." Elsa whispered. "You warned the killer." Miss Dawes' face went pale. "I didn't mean harm. I thought Trent would frighten him. That's all." Miss Marple's voice was almost kind. Intent seldom softens the result, my dear. Lightning flashed again, whitening the windows. For a brief second, the bell's shadow stretched long across the pews. Miss Dawes looked up at it, eyes wet. "Can sin echo?" she asked softly. Marple's reply was quiet. "It does, until someone stops listening." Thunder rolled through the church. The hanging lamp above them flickered twice, then died. And from the tower, a sound slow, dragging metal. Slack turned sharply. "Who's up there now?" No one answered. Only the faint rustle of rope against wood. Night again. The third since Peter's death. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of thunder. Inspector Slack posted 2 constables outside the church gates. He wasn't taking chances now. Miss Marple sat in the vestry, knitting folded beside her, watching the candle burn low. Elsa waited near the side door, her small testing lamp glowing faintly blue. Slack paced. "If Trent had help, he'll come back for what's left. Thieves always do." Marple nodded. "And so do guilty men, Inspector." They returned to the scene not for greed, but for relief. The tower loomed above them, a black pillar against a silver sky. Its silence pressed down like a held breath. Slack checked his watch. 11:30. "You should have gone home hours ago." "I did," Marple said softly. But the truth didn't. The candle sputtered. Footsteps outside. A murmur of voices. Then quiet. Elsa whispered, "Someone's coming." Slack drew his torch, stepping behind the choir screen. Marple didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the tower door. The handle turned slowly. A man stepped in, carrying a wrench and a coil of wire. Charles Trent. Hat low, coat collar raised, movements careful but not enough to hide the tremor in his hand. Slack's voice cut the dark. "End of the line, Trent." The man froze, then sighed. "Of course you'd be waiting." He dropped the coil to the floor. "I came to disconnect the feed. Nothing more." Miss Marple's voice was steady. "You came to erase the last trace of your crime. Electricity leaves evidence." Trent laughed softly. "Evidence won't matter when you can't prove intent. The old lady gave me funds. The vicar signed the bills. I built what they wanted." "A bell that kills?" asked Slack. "A warning system," Trent said sharply. "For thieves, for birds, for—" He stopped. His voice cracked. "For a boy who wouldn't keep quiet." The words hung in the air. Elsa stepped closer, face pale. "You knew he'd touch the rope." Trent turned toward her. "He was meddling. I meant to shock him, that's all. Just scare him away." Marple's tone was low, almost sorrowful. "Fear always runs faster than mercy, Mr. Trent." He stared at her, chest heaving. "You think you understand everything. You don't. I didn't kill him. The system failed, that's all." Slack moved forward, dropped the wrench. Trent hesitated. Then, instead of letting go, he swung toward the bell switch near the wall. Slack lunged. They struggled, boots scraping on stone. The wrench hit the floor with a clang. A spark shot from the switch box. Elsa gasped. "The current's live," Marple shouted. "Inspector, step back." Too late. The wire on the floor began to hum, faint blue light crawling across it like veins of fire. The bell above gave a low, tremoring groan. Trent stumbled, eyes wide with sudden panic. He reached toward the line as if to tear it loose. "Don't!" cried Marple. He stopped one heartbeat too late. The wire sparked violently. A blinding flash filled the vestry. Thunder outside answered it. When the light cleared, Trent lay still on the stones. Alive, barely. Smoke curled from his sleeve. Slack knelt beside him. "Get a doctor," he shouted to the constables outside. Miss Marple didn't move. Her gaze lifted toward the bell tower. The rope hung still again, but the air seemed to pulse with leftover charge like guilt made visible. Elsa whispered, "Is it over?" Marple's reply was quiet. "For him, yes, but not for those who helped him." A sound echoed above, faint, deliberate. 3 slow knocks from the belfry floor. Not wind. Not echo. A signal. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. He wasn't alone. The doctor came and went. Trent still breathed, though shallowly. His eyes flickered but didn't open. Slack stood over him, jaw tight. "Conscience isn't much use unconscious," he muttered. Miss Marple didn't answer. She was watching the rope again. It swayed faintly in the lantern light, not from wind but from movement above. The 3 knocks still echoed in her ears. Slow, even, deliberate. She turned to the inspector. "Someone else is still up there." Slack frowned. "The constables searched the grounds." "Yes," she said softly, "but not the rafters." He groaned. "You can't mean—" "I do," she said. The sound came from the belfry floor. Slack grabbed his torch. "Stay here, Miss Marple." She smiled faintly. "I've heard that too many times to obey it now." They climbed together. Each step groaned beneath them. The tower air was damp, thick with the smell of burned copper. Lantern light flickered along the walls, catching dust that shimmered like ash. Halfway up, Slack whispered, "Hear that?" A soft scraping metal against stone. Then silence again. They reached the final platform. The bell hung motionless. But behind it, near the wooden beam, a small trapdoor lay open. Miss Marple peered inside. A narrow crawl space, lined with boards, just wide enough for one person to hide. And in that cramped dark, a pair of eyes stared back. "Come out," she said gently. No movement. Then a voice, quiet, female, strained. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Slack aimed the torch. Miss Dawes, her elegant composure gone, hat askew, hands blackened with soot. She crawled out slowly, shivering, one arm clutching a leather satchel. Slack seized it. "What's this?" Her voice shook. "My accounts. The real ones." Miss Marple nodded slightly. "The ones you came to destroy." Miss Dawes sank against the wall. "I couldn't let him talk. Not after the first mistake. I paid him to stop, but he kept wiring things, adding more. He said the bell would never truly stop ringing, unless someone died beneath it." Slack's face hardened. "And you let him test it on a boy?" Tears ran down her cheeks. "No, I thought he'd frighten him. I didn't know he'd gone that far. When I found out, it was too late." Marple's voice stayed calm. "Guilt has its own echo, Miss Dawes. It grows louder the longer one hides." The woman looked up, eyes glassy. "You think I don't hear it? Every night that bell, in my head." Outside, wind rose again. It swept through the tower window, carrying a long moan across the metal rim. The sound shivered through the wood. The bell groaned once more, deep, slow, almost human. Miss Dawes covered her ears. "Make it stop!" Slack grabbed her arm. "It's just the wind." Marple shook her head. "No, Inspector. The current's still active." Elsa's voice called from below. "I can cut it. The control box." "Do it!" Slack shouted. A faint click echoed upward. The humming stopped. Silence filled the tower like air after a storm. Miss Dawes slid to the floor, trembling. "It's done," she whispered. Marple studied her quietly. "Confession doesn't undo the act, but it frees the truth. And truth, once spoken, never fades." Slack cuffed the woman gently. "You'll answer for it in court." She didn't resist. Only whispered. The bell was meant to ring for peace. Marple looked toward the ceiling. "It finally has." They started down the stairs. The tower creaked softly behind them, settling, breathing again after its long deception. Near the door, Slack paused. "Strange thing, Miss Marple, after all this, I still hear it. That low hum." She smiled faintly. "So do I. But that's not the bell, Inspector." "What is it, then?" "Remorse. It hums in every guilty heart." Outside, dawn began to break pale, hesitant, new. The storm had passed. Yet from the distance, a faint echo rolled through the valley, a single note, soft and clear. Slack froze. "You heard that?" Marple nodded once. "The truth never disappears, Inspector. It just travels slower through air." Morning settled over Street Aldwins like a sigh. Soft light washed the stones clean. The bell tower stood still again, harmless, almost humble. Miss Marple sat by the vicarage window, tea steaming gently beside her. Lady Bantry fussed with a plate of scones, insisting everyone eat. Inspector Slack leaned against the mantel, hat in his hands, expression softer than usual. The storm had left its mark: scattered leaves, broken shutters, and a village strangely quiet. Margaret Copley poured another round of tea. "Such a dreadful business," she murmured. "But at least it's over now." Miss Marple stirred her cup slowly. "Over," she repeated, "is a word the living use when they've not yet begun to think." Slack sighed. "The lad will be buried tomorrow. Full honours from the parish." He looked toward the window. "The Reverend says the bell will ring once for him." Marple nodded. "One true sound after all the false ones." Lady Bantry dabbed at her eyes. "I can't believe Miss Dawes. Such a fine lady." "Fine," said Marple softly, "is often the word we use when we can't quite say flawed." Slack managed a weary smile. "You and your sayings, Miss Marple. You ought to write a book." "I prefer conversation, Inspector. Books can't answer back." Elsa entered then, carrying a folded cloth. She laid it on the table, unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a small copper plate, the one from Peter's notes. "I thought you might want to see this," she said. "I cleaned it properly this time. No more current. Just metal now." Marple touched the smooth surface. It reflected light softly, harmless at last. "Strange," she said, "how something so small carried so much weight." Elsa nodded. "He recorded the voltages here. The proof. He was right all along." Silence fell for a moment. Outside, the sound of hammering drifted from the square men repairing the lightning rod, voices calm again. Life returning to habit. Slack straightened, hat in hand. "I'll be off then. Paperwork waits, and the Chief Inspector thinks I'm too sentimental for village work." Marple smiled kindly. "Then perhaps the Chief Inspector has never had tea after tragedy. It changes a man's tone." He hesitated by the door. "You know, I used to think you just guessed at things. And now I think you see what the rest of us walk past. That," she said quietly, "is all detecting ever, is noticing where comfort stops looking." He nodded once, then left. The door clicked behind him. Dolly refilled Marple's cup. "You'll stay a few days, won't you?" "For the funeral, yes," she replied. "The village needs to hear the bell once more, this time for the right reason." The clock on the wall chimed the half-hour, each sound soft, steady, innocent again. Marple leaned back, watching sunlight spill across the table. "People say machines don't feel," she said. "But they do remember. Every scratch, every spark, every careless hand leaves its mark, and sometimes they tell the story better than we do." Elsa smiled faintly. "You sound as if you forgive them all, the guilty, the foolish, even the bell." Marple's eyes warmed. "Forgiveness," she said, "is simply understanding placed beside regret." Outside, the church bell moved at last. A single toll, clear and low, rolled across the green. The village paused to listen. Children stopped playing. Shutters opened. The sound lingered like breath, then faded into morning. Lady Bantry whispered, "That's the sound of peace, Jane." Marple nodded. "Yes, peace never shouts. It rings once. Then let silence finish the sentence." She set her cup down, folded her knitting, and looked toward the quiet tower. Its shadow stretched gently across the grass. Order restored, truth spoken, and, at last, no echo left unanswered. Thank you, dear friends, for listening to the Bell Tower Murder. In Street, Aldwyn's, even the smallest chime can tell the loudest truth. Until next time, keep your tea warm, your heart steady, and your eyes open for the details others miss.